My name's Martin Woodward. If you want to send abuse my way on Twitter, feel free. It's at Martin Woodward and all the social media platforms, or just martinwoodward@github.com if you want to email me. As folks mentioned, I'm going to be talking about the DevOps journey. Sorry, not the DevOps journey. The DevRel journey. There you go. That's my day job, talking about DevOps. The DevRel journey that we've been on here at GitHub, and kind of how things we've learned along the way and things I've learned as the team's been growing. Now, I want to just sort of start this talk by warning. There's actually 3 lies in this title, so we'll see if you can spot them all. The first lie that I've got for you is actually DevRel wasn't 0 when I started at GitHub. I started last year when I came over to GitHub full time, and while I've been a fan of the company, I've been an amazing admirer of all the work they've been doing. It was interesting that it wasn't really like sort of formal DevRel as I understood it and as I'd seen it before. But the whole company at GitHub had been doing DevRel from the beginning. GitHub is it was a small startup focused on developers. It grew from sort of 0 to 200 with one kind of way of working, and like literally everybody in the company was doing DevRel back then. They were talking to developers, getting to know, doing meetups, handing out stickers. I think if you haven't got a GitHub sticker on your laptop, then we've kind of failed there. We should have definitely got you one. Maybe next when we come back to in-person events. In my experience, I've done some startups, done some other companies, and been involved in some growth of different teams and things. When you grow a company like an order of magnitude, 10x sort of thing, you kind of need new structures and new organization in place. And GitHub had grown from say 200 to a couple of thousand, and it kind of needed a team that helped create and nurture channels for communication, ensuring that the teams of engineers, the teams of product managers, people in marketing, things like that, ensuring that they had a connection into the core developer community that's at the heart of GitHub. If you cut anybody open at GitHub, they bleed the community. So it's a very easy job and a very easy sort of company to work at doing DevRel. But we needed this team. We needed to ensure consistent quality of output, and we needed kind of a team to represent the developers, to advocate for developers, and to help make sure there's this strong network between developers and the rest of the business. So that's what my team sort of set up, and that's what we started creating. Now, that moves us on to the next lie, really, about sort of this talk title, in that my org actually isn't 60 people right now. So it wasn't 0 and it wasn't 60, but never mind. It was never let facts get in the way of a good story, I guess, is probably the motto there. But it's actually about 38 sort of bums in seats right now. Team's growing to around about 50 probably over the next year. But not everyone at GitHub is doing DevRel, that's doing kind of DevRel related activities, kind of reports in my team. So let's kind of talk about my team first of all, explain that, and then explain what's going on elsewhere around the business, just so you can kind of understand things. So on our team, we have developer programs. So that's, PMs and community managers who are managing the program. So like the STARS program, which is our ambassador influencer type program, managing our open source outreach, managing our international meetups and our sort of meetup relationships, things like that. Things we want to build a program around and scale out, and where we're nurturing and growing channels back into the business. They live in developer programs, program managers, community managers. Then we have our docs, our learning platforms and strategy team. It's a small team focused on kind of, it's almost like the PMs of our doc systems and our learning systems, and making sure they work, managing the strategy, doing content strategy, planning out documentation, that sort of thing. We have the docs team, which is a fabulous team of writers that are spread across the world, organized in kind of squads that sort of swarm on different bits of content. Because GitHub's such a broad product, there's no way one person can be an expert on everything that's in GitHub, and so we tend to have kind of geolocated expert, teams of experts who can help swarm on things and help get content out there. and then work with the program managers and the engineers who are building the features to help make sure we can educate people on their features, and then also working with the open source community, because we're GitHub, of course our docs are open source, and so help make sure open source contributions come in and have a sort of consistent voice, consistent messaging, and a factually accurate and work and all that sort of thing. So we have that amazing team of writers spread all the way across the world, and that's they're an absolute pleasure to work with as well, because we've been working remote forever basically, and we're able to support kind of a lifestyle that's quite attractive to a lot of people in the writing side. Rather than going into an office, you can do some writing in van life and go touring around, or you can live where you want to live in the world. I'm joining you here from a field in the middle of Northern Ireland, for example. So we're able to kind of attract some of the best talents in the world, and it's a pleasure to work with that docs team. And then last but very much not least is the developer advocacy team. Developer advocacy, I find, is what a lot of people outside of DevRel think of as DevRel. They think of that person that gets up on stage and gives a talk. They think of demos. They think of all the whiz-bang stuff and going to meetups and going out and doing conference talks and YouTube videos and TikToks and that sort of thing. That's important and that's vital. And again, the developer advocacy team we have here is, absolutely world class. But that's not all the be all and end all as DevRel, as we all know. And so I do like to point that out when I'm sort of communicating out what DevRel is to the wider org. But then across GitHub, DevRel lives in the main sort of product engineering group at GitHub. And I personally, that's where I want to live with a DevRel team, and that's where I prefer to live, especially in a developer-focused company. It makes sense for DevRel to live in different places depending on the organization that DevRel's a part of, in my experience. But for a developer tools company, a developer-focused company, I think DevRel needs to live as part of the main product and engineering group so that you can make sure you're helping make the product better and helping make sure you're connecting developers with the core engineering of the business, because that's your target market. It's what you're talking to. Now, we have a few sister teams apart from all of the engineering teams, so people who build, the version control features, people who build actions, people who build issues. We work with all those. We're sort of sister teams to all those teams. But we also have a couple of very, very close teams that we spend a lot of time working with. One is the education team, who GitHub's education program doesn't report to me, but it's by far the best education program I've seen out there. It's phenomenal. The team working on that are amazing. Joe Nash, who's spoken at a few conferences, was involved in starting that team, and then the team continues to go from strength to strength now as well. It's a fabulous sort of group to work with, and they're off busy not only helping students and stuff learning how to code and how to get into and use GitHub, but they're also busy building lots of mini DevRels and the DevRel people of the future with their Campus Experts program. So a fabulous group of people over there. Now, the education team has both engineering as well as kind of community management folks, because we have products inside of GitHub that are aimed at students and further education establishments like GitHub Classroom, and we have the GitHub Student Pack, which is this kind of collection of over 100 sort of partner offers and things, which we do all the qualification for, and that's significant amount of kind of operational work that has to be done and fraud detection work and all that sort of stuff that we take on. But it means we can have a bunch of partners into that student program as well, and get really good offers out to the students that are learning how to code on our next generation of developers. And then the other team that we work with in GitHub is the communities team. This tripped me up like immensely when I first came to GitHub, because I was a community PM. I worked in community teams previously, is how I thought of myself. But in GitHub, community is a feature area. Like, there are people building community features. There are people building discussions. There are people building... that we switched on a feature last week that makes sure the code of conduct for a repo is visible to people, ensuring community best practice. There are people who put community self-service functionality in and try and help you deal with toxic people, and make sure you can do moderation and all that sort of stuff. So community is a feature area, and we spend a lot of time working with the communities team, but the communities team isn't DevRel, so that's worth calling out. And then we also work with some partner teams across the business. We have a marketing team that lives, and this is sort of, the PR and comms folks live within the marketing organization, so that's separate from product, obviously. Where we live in DevRel, it's a separate kind of reporting structure into the CEO. And we have a events team, again, amazing events team. And obviously folks know from GitHub, from all of our amazing swag, we have a fantastic brand team. But even better than the brand team, or as a result of the brand team, we actually have a shop. We have like dedicated team that sends swag out. And as a DevRel person, that is just phenomenal to me, that I can go create an issue in a repo somewhere, and then the magic swag pixies send swag to people. No more stuffing stickers in envelopes, no more stuffing t-shirts and scarves into things and sending them all the way around the world and all the trips to the post office and things. There's a team that does that. It's phenomenal. Highly recommend it if your company wants to invest in that. It saves definitely a lot of effort, in my experience, that normally happens in the DevRel space. I'm just showing off, really. We also have the revenue teams that we work with. So if it's like traditional sales organizations, making sure we kind of helping them, making sure we support any events that they do. They have a field marketing team that are running kind of local events that are very much more revenue focused, whereas the DevRel events are much more about learning, much more about breadth adoption, that sort of thing. And then interestingly, the support team doesn't live within DevRel either at GitHub. The support team is in a separate organization that is focused on dealing with day-to-day developer support, helping people on the community forums, all that sort of work. So again, sometimes that lives in DevRel, sometimes it doesn't, and GitHub it doesn't. And then the final group that I've sometimes had in my org, sometimes haven't, depending on the company, is the partner relations. So working with partner companies to do events, to communicate out to customers and developers and things. That partner org in GitHub, again, separate org that we work closely with. So lots of people doing DevRel, not everybody on the DevRel team, and we kind of communicate and coordinate and work together, which is awesome. Right, so the whole point of this conference and the whole point today really is talking about managing DevRel teams. So, sort of with, 15 minutes to go? We should probably start on that topic. So the first thing really I found, and this is kind of pithy management advice really, is to make sure that you have a clear vision. I'm always amazed that I haven't done a good job of making my vision clear with the team and like sort of helping the team come together and explain, what it is we're trying to do and why. So make sure there's a clear vision, make sure the team are bought into the vision, that they've ideally helped create that vision, and then, explain things to everybody and then keep repeating it. It's important. You can't repeat your vision often enough. Why are we here? What are we doing? What are we trying to achieve? Now, one of the topics that comes up in basically every single Twitter space I've been involved in around DevRel, and has come up already in the conference, is around OKRs and metrics and all that sort of stuff. So, there's been some topics on this already during the past couple of days, and there'll be some more tomorrow and things. The important thing is that, for me, we use OKRs, so objectives and key results. The OKRs should be focused on impact, not activity. So you don't measure, I did 20 blog posts. It's what impact did those 20 blog posts have, or what impact did your hackathon have, They should always be tied to business goals as well. So if you're trying to achieve something as a business, that's what your OKR should be aligned towards. And your goal as DevRel is, I treat it very much as a service team. We're out trying to make everybody else shine. We're trying to make the product and engineering features shine. We're trying to make the events team shine. We're trying to make the people who appear in our content shine as well. And it's just incredibly important to kind of focus on this impact rather than activity. Remember, your OKRs are for internal alignment. So it's helping your team understand what it is they're doing and why, and how we're tracking and pushing, and they should be ambitious. If your OKRs are all green, then you're not trying hard enough. You should have some amber and some red OKRs. You should always be trying to do a little bit harder than you think is slightly possible to see how far you can get. And you should be learning and you should be measuring. That's what they're for. They're also very useful for communicating with other teams. Like, this is what I care about. This is what's important. What OKRs are not important for is for justifying your team's value to management. If you're hoping your OKRs are going to convince management of your value, you've already lost. We're DevRel. We should be, we thrive on influence. And we thrive on people being excited, people talking about us. Every business unit in your company should want to work with the DevRel team. Every part of the business should be raving about the DevRel team. And if your leader, or whether it's the CEO or whether it's one level down or whatever, if that leader is hearing lots of great feedback from across the business and lots of people wanting to work with you, people saying, oh my goodness, what amazing work this team are doing, that sort of thing, you find the OKRs, people don't care about them as much. Senior, they're still great for communication. You still need them. But people above you tend to be like, yeah, you're doing a great job. You're lovely. Would you like some more resources? Would you like some more headcount? It's always like the same thing with a contract, If you start to have to dig into the details of a contract with a customer, it's probably not going in the right direction. And the same is true with OKRs and management, in my experience. So use the OKRs of the business to help align your activities. But don't be thinking, if I have amazing OKRs, that's going to justify 29 headcount. You need to work on your influence better, I think. Right. Important that we have a clear vision and that we repeat it. I can't say that often enough, so I'll make sure that we remember that and that you set those goals with your team. When you're talking to your team, it's important to give feedback. Give feedback that's timely, that's appropriate to when things are done, that's actionable, that's prompt, and that's heard. So an example, if somebody's wanting some feedback on a document or on a positioning paper or on a talk they're proposing to give, take the time to give them the feedback. But don't, oh, I don't like it, or, oh, it's okay, or even that talk is fantastic. This feedback is no good. It needs to be actionable feedback. Even if you think that thing is the best thing you've ever seen, why is it the best thing that you've ever seen? What is it that makes it good, that makes it better than other things that you've looked at in the past or other things that they've done? Make sure that there's action in place and make sure that it's understandable. Also, make sure that you're leveling that feedback appropriately to the person that you're talking to. So if you're talking to a very senior, very experienced person, you can obviously take a bunch of shortcuts. You can give them that next level down of polish type of feedback or that sort of thing. But if you're talking to a brand new in role, dev advocate who's just started out, give them a little bit of improvement feedback. You don't need to kind of completely go through absolutely every little thing. Make sure that the feedback is appropriate and tuned, and that allows them to hear it. It allows them to understand it, allows them to take action, and then you can iterate and improve and keep getting better each time. My biggest advice when working with sort of people is always to play to people's strengths. So that's super pithy, but what are they good at? What do they suck at? Stop trying to manage people into doing things that they suck at. If try and manage the work and manage the people into the things that play to their strengths, and create work and organize work in a way that plays to your strengths as a team as well as the individual strengths as people. And then recruit, fill in gaps, get people to fill in gaps where necessary. Understand that it doesn't have to be perfect all the time and that things don't have to be amazing straight away, but what do you need to grow in the future over time so you can build up skills and start filling in these gaps is important as well. But always be thinking about, what do we do really well? What did somebody excel at? What are they doing good? And try and tweak the work to focus on people's strengths is my biggest advice. And when you're doing this, it's very, very, very important that people understand what your vision is and that it's clear and that you repeat it. When you're performance managing folks, you need to make sure, that's very tricky in the DevRel world. especially if you're dealing with kind of very publicly visible people. As a manager of people with large Twitter followings, that can be quite exciting at times when you're trying to, encourage different performance and things. And sometimes you see a bit of subtweeting going on, people are not happy and stuff. And there's a significant, corporate reputational risk there because we're deliberately putting people in the public eye. And then again, if those people, need to go through some feedback and need to be performance managed, this can be very, very tricky. So you need to get good at performance management if you're going to be managing a large team in the DevRel space or in any space that's publicly facing. So, you need to learn how to you need to get practice on holding people accountable and helping them find the right path. But I think when I've been talking to other folks, my biggest advice is always to help people take ownership of their own career paths, and then you enable those career paths and you help them get better at those career paths and find the right roles for people and all that sort of thing. So it's tricky and it's something I lose sleep about all the time. But performance management is definitely something you have to work on. I don't, because I've got an amazing team right now, but it's definitely something that's concerned me in the past. And then my biggest mistakes as a manager have been to focus too much time on performance management and sort of helping people who are underperforming, and not time boxing that, not constraining the time, but also really the emotional energy I spend on it, so that I don't forget to spend lots of time with the people that are doing the best work. I said here, invest time where you get the most return, and you should always do that. Limit the time on where you're getting a little return and invest a huge amount of time in the people that are giving you great results and help them grow more. There's nothing worse when where you lose somebody you really didn't want to lose, and you could have spent more time with them. You could have helped them grow quicker, and you could have helped them understand that you valued them as much as you do. So let people know why they're awesome and help keep them growing is my biggest advice. And then when you are, that's great for when you're growing people, and that's the funnest part, for growing people. Remember, though, that what is right for you and how you work isn't always the right thing for them. So always be looking to, how can I find this person a mentor that will suit their work style? How can I connect them with role models that are following a similar career trajectory or similar career path to them, but are maybe, 5 or 10 years further down the line? And remember, you're going to need junior people coming into your team as it starts to grow to keep the senior people on your team happy. Especially in DevRel, people love educating, people love to grow people. That's why we're in this job. And so you need people in your team for people to grow as well. And so make sure you make room for junior people to come on board in the team, because that not only helps them grow and helps you grow as an organization, but it also helps keep your more senior people engaged in the business, engaged in the company, and happy and growing themselves. It helps them learn by teaching is oftentimes what we find with DevRel folks. Know that when you're growing these junior folks, they're probably not going to stay with your company their entire career, or they're in that team the entire career. So figure out how you can still win if and when they move on to the next role. Make sure that if this person that you're growing is amazing and they're just the best person ever, that if they decide to move on to a different team, that's fine. That's part of natural career development. How can they do that in a way that they still have a great relationship back with your organization, that they're still giving value back into your team, and that they turn into one of your biggest advocates when they leave and move on to their next role? When you're growing a team, the only way I really know how to grow teams that do similar things is to grow them organically and then grow and divide. You can grow a team that's doing different functional roles by bringing in new people, but quite often, if you're trying to have a team that's functionally the same, like a tech writing team or something like that, but where you're trying to have a large number of people that do a similar role, then you need to make sure you grow and divide those teams organically over time, and understand you can't just go from 0 to 60 overnight if you want to maintain the culture that you've built up in that team and you want to maintain the kind of work patterns. This is classic kind of textbook stuff, Tuckman stages of team development, but I'm always surprised at how many people kind of haven't been through this yet, the sort of storming, forming, norming, performing kind of thing. teams go through these natural stages of development. Go look up Tuckman's stages of development if you want to learn more. The key thing is that performing stage. That's where teams are doing their best work, when they've been together a while, when they've been through the forming, storming, and norming stages. So I always try and keep my teams in that performing zone for as long as possible. I will often, keep a team together as a unit, as a cohesive kind of squad, and change what they work on rather than reorg people in and out of the team. Reorging people in and out of the team is always quite disruptive because they've got to go through their team stages. And what's amazing when you have like a bunch of performing teams is then when they're in an agile organization, or when you see it working correctly, or in teams that are doing DevOps, that sort of thing, you see these groups of performing teams swarm. So performing becomes swarming, and you see them getting together and do amazing things. We had a Universe conference a couple of weeks ago, GitHub Universe, which is our like major sort of annual developer conference, and it was just phenomenal to see these teams from across the whole organization, teams within my org, but teams across all the other orgs in GitHub, come together and really kind of swarm on an issue on this conference and just knock it out the park and produce some of the best content I've ever seen and some of the best outcomes I've ever seen in my entire life. So that was a very proud moment for me. When you're building your teams, I'm a massive believer that the healthiest ecosystems in nature are the most diverse, and that's especially true in DevRel teams. You need diverse representation, you need diverse viewpoints, you need huge amounts of inclusion in the team to bring in people from all across the community that you're trying to represent. And remember, I get really, really, really annoyed with some folks on comments and social media and things. Hey, who knew? People on the internet were wrong. But you have to work just really hard on finding people. It's not about lowering any bars. It's about working harder as a hiring manager to go find the right folks and find amazing people, because people, especially from underrepresented backgrounds, are underrepresented. So it's harder to find them, and it's harder to get people into your team. So it's harder to make them feel welcome. You have to build an environment where people feel welcome and safe, and you have to build a good reputation, not lose it. Look at your job specs as well, everybody. Do you really need all those requirements in your job specs? What is it the person's going to do? What are the results that they're going to achieve? And make sure you're being inclusive and using inclusive language in your recruiting. I want to have a quick chat about team safety, and then we'll go over to questions. So for team safety, I like to make sure, this is something I use with the teams quite often when I'm talking, is it's kind of like a fist of five sort of test on psychological safety. So how people are feeling, how are they working, that sort of thing. You also need to build kind of spaces that people can experiment in. So maybe it's rather than the main social media handle, maybe create a sub handle that you can experiment and tweet on. Maybe create channels, use personal channels and things like that for experimenting in production. Make sure you measure, learn, and report back. When your team make mistakes, own it. If somebody on the team messes up, it's your fault. So own that. Work with the people who have got the issue. Figure out what the issue is. Figure out how you're going to work it. But it's your fault because you haven't set the right guardrails in place. So you own it. Give the feedback privately to the individual. Report back learnings. And make sure you're building guardrails for the team rather than building kind of friction, rather than building turnstiles. The thing I also worry about is a lot of times is around trolls and all that sort of thing, and doxing and sort of safety of the team. Remember that the way that trolls win is with emotional DDoS attacks. They're trying to consume time from you. So don't waste too much time. Set clear guidelines as to what's expected in your community. Delete, ban people without worrying too much. It's not an irreversible decision, but always act calmly, act quickly. One of the things I quite often jump to, in fact, I have a printed out card right next to me with this on and keep it in my wallet, is some steps or incident management that I think you should follow. You should totally kind of come in, figure out, who, what, whys, establish the facts, identify and prioritize your risks. Is this a risk to reputation, to life, safety? I've had bricks thrown through people windows. I've had people doxed, all that sort of thing, so serious actual life safety risks. Or is it a reputational damage? Is there an asset damage to something, to the resources? Money, things that are money can be replaced. Things that are about life safety, about reputation, it's much harder to build those back. So identify what the issues are, what the risks are. Build an action plan. assign it, track it. Do you need to request help? And then I repeat. And the usual when you need to treat something like an incident is when comms is starting to get confused, when multiple people are pinging you, and you've got multiple people reporting issues and all that sort of stuff. Right, we're finishing up. Last thing is to scale. Remember, you have a finite number of breaths in your body and a finite number of keystrokes in your hand. Let's make them count. Let's build channels that we can do. Let's think about how you amplify all of the content that you create rather than doing 1, 2 things. How can you do it to 100, 1,000, 2,000, all that sort of thing. And that takes me to my final lie of this conference, and that is that I know what I'm talking about. I really don't. Making it up as we all go along. That's why DevRelCon is so important to me, just to be able to learn from all the great work everybody's doing. But it also helps when you've got kind of a fantastic team around you. So I encourage you to check out some of their work, docs.github.com. Go to the YouTube site, youtube.com/GitHub, which is some amazing content there from the latest conference. Or check out our GitHub stars, which are our influencer kind of MVP style group. Check out them as well for some amazing people doing some amazing work. Right, I'm going to hand back and talk to the folks. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And there's also the Discord for Q&A and questions. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Martin.
Hopefully that was okay. It's not often I'm normally talking about the technology rather than how I work. So it's always a very odd experience. So yeah.
I certainly related to a lot of what you mentioned. I really appreciated the mention of the stages of a team. I've been in tech for over 20 years. And I think I've spent maybe 10% of that time on a performing team. If people don't know the theory, I think they might think, oh, teams that are performing, but it's pretty specific and it's really challenging. If you've got any movement on who's on the team or what your goals are, then you slide back a category. But yeah, I think I got to say, awesome that GitHub, you don't have to justify the value of your team. I know a lot of folks out in the audience don't have that.
I'm a very privileged position. So yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I think there's a couple questions from the audience.
Okay.
Some of them are talking about measurement, which I know there's a lot more talks on metrics coming up. So stand by for that. But the first question comes from Akhil Sharma, and they're asking, have there been iterations to the team structure since you started? So did you inherit all of that hierarchy or did you build that out?
Yeah, I built that out. The team started with I want to say, I should know the exact numbers. Mostly dev advocacy. Kind of didn't really know what people were doing, if I'm honest. Like people didn't know themselves what they were really doing. And so we had people who very clearly were dev advocates, and then people who were very clearly community managers. And they're two very, very, very different roles. But I don't think it was clear to them that they were those two things, and that they were focusing on different elements of DevRel. And so putting in some of the formal structures and kind of saying, this is what you do. This is what your job is. This is kind of what a career path looks like for somebody doing community management or program management versus somebody doing developer advocacy versus a docs writer or a docs content strategist. Each of those things still needs a career path. If you're a docs writer, you want a path that takes you all the way up to kind of the highest levels in the business as an IC writer. Because heck, I really want you writing on my product because you're amazing and you know so much stuff. And so I need to make sure there's career ladders for everybody and all those sorts of things. And previously it kind of been a bit more ad hoc, and especially with startups, there isn't really kind of like a promotion ladder and sort of reward systems and reviews and things. So all that kind of stuff is fairly new. But that's kind of how it went. Yeah, I know my team are in the chat as well, so they can probably jump into Discord and argue that I didn't do any of that stuff and I don't know what I'm talking about. So yeah, I refer you to lie number 3.
Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges, especially with a lot of companies that are trying to add DevRel to what they're doing right now, is they don't have a very clear sense of what it's going to be, and they focus on, okay, let's get someone in here that can get it up and running or continue what we're doing. But thinking about the future, that path, that career ladder, all of that is super important.
So many people here are one-man DevRel teams or one-person DevRel teams often, and that's super hard. And so you've got to figure out how you focus your time, and that's a very, very, very different role to be a one-person DevRel shop inside a marketing org than it is to be a larger DevRel team inside of a developer-focused company, And I know every company wants to be developer-focused, Like every bank I go speak to now says that they're a software company with a banking license, and frankly, GitHub's a swag company with a developer tool on a sideline. But it's very, very different, and like the people, what they fundamentally care about and what they fundamentally understand is very different. But I still say that if people want the majority of feedback senior management get is from what people are talking to them about and what they're hearing from people elsewhere in the org. We have an amazing position that we get to generate a lot of excitement and a lot of interest in things. So if you're using that to build energy and excitement around the organization, don't be taking credit for it. Always be giving the credit elsewhere to people and making everybody else shine. People want to then work with you, and they're always campaigning, oh, we can't get enough of XYZ's time because of such and such. And so the manager's, how do we get you more time? Well, I need more people. And so, it often works like that rather than the OKR, the how much DevRel generated leads I've brought in, what my pipeline is, all that sort of stuff. Like, it's good to have those numbers. It's good to track them for internal measurement. Are we doing better? Justification wise, it's usually the conversations that people are having with senior management and how much people want to work with you, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I appreciated that you mentioned the safety aspect. I've certainly been on teams where people have been doxxed and you're getting emails from legal parts of the business asking if the tweets that people on your team are sending are problematic or not. So I think it's certainly important that people be aware of that. So I just wanted to say thank you for mentioning that. Someone in the chat also mentioned that those notes about psychological safety were very important. So just thank you for including that.
Yeah, it really is. It's that's the thing that worries me the most, if I'm honest, is the safety side. Not so much the psychological safety. Definitely, we have to create that on the team. But it's also, I'm asking people to put themselves in the public eye, almost putting themselves in harm's way. Are we providing as a business the appropriate security measures so that if something does happen to this person, especially, if they're a woman on the internet or if they're from an underrepresented minority on the internet, you know what I mean? They're more likely to get attacked because of those reasons. And so what safety measures do we have in place? What reporting mechanisms do we have in place so that person can feel like they can do it and that we can get them through this? Sometimes you can't always bring your best self to work as well. It's hard. We're professionally perky for a living, and sometimes you're not feeling it, and sometimes you feel under attack, and so you've got to make space for when those people are going through those things and help them through it.